My name's Chris.
And I'm Kristie.
This is the Washing Up Podcast, and it's semi-final week.
It is.
Fancy dessert week.
Yeah, not semi-trailer week.
Nope, not semi-trailer week, definitely not. I mean, I thought about it, possibly.
Yeah.
But I'm sure Ice Road Truckers run a semi-trailer week.
Or like those people who do monster trucks. They do a semi-trailer monster truck week.
Oh, that could be fun.
Yes.
Basketball's series that does a semi-pro week.
Oh, right.
Just Will Ferrell.
Yeah, there are other semis I could mention, but
No.
I'm going to keep it clean.
Let's keep it clean. We are a clean podcast.
We are.
Don't worry about the explicit
you're
tag, which is right next to the
If
name.
you're here expecting not safe for work, well...
You've listened. So we need to talk about, obviously, what a big week this was. What a huge week. What an amazing week. And everyone's talking about it, so we're just going to drive straight in. Mm-hmm. The dairy farmers of Canada.
Oh my gosh. Revelations, people. Revelations.
They use manure
To compost, it's going to save the world.
I got so sick. I mean, wonderful, first of all, that you're sponsoring the show. Thank you for your money. We greatly appreciate it. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure to CBC. But I got so sick and tired of seeing that chef talking about his compost and then throwing to a woman in a field, confirming that they too use manure for compost. But she made it sound like other farms don't.
No.
Like, what are they using?
They don't compost. They're using the cow pats to build housing.
Well, you can build structure out of it. It's sustainable housing.
They're drying it out as fuel.
It's good fuel. It works. It does work.
They're putting it in the middle of tents for Girl Guides, just so when you go and you're like, oh, thank you for setting up a tent for us, and you walk and you're like, oh, there's a cow pat right in the middle. That's awesome. Thank you.
It's authentic.
Yeah.
What I became
Air freshener, I assume.
What I became a little bit more concerned about personally was she also made it sound at one point like they just shat in the field.
Like the farmers themselves.
Like we compost and manure. Are you shitting in the field? Is it just, Uncle Bill comes down for a weekend on the farm? Where's Uncle Bill? He's out in the paddock. What's he doing? Working on the crops.
Look, you don't have to do that anymore. If you just watch that Grand Designs episode with that person who builds the whole reed filtration system.
Oh, yes.
I don't know how many reeds you'd need to filtrate cow poo, but give it a whirl.
I suspect a lot.
And farmer poo.
I mean, remember last year we were sponsored by the dairy producers of the Greater Toronto Area. That was during the Verges, if you remember. They run all their cows right through the middle of Young and Dundas. So, obviously, obviously this is a response from the dairy farmers of Canada.
They're like a united front.
They have farms, is what they really want to point out. And again, the chef in the kitchen going, I compost, and as he just pulls the stalk off some corn. And that's his level of compost. And then she's like, look at my field.
He's actually not going to use that corn. He's just pulling that. He just bought it for the composting.
He's really into composting. He's not actually a chef. He really just likes composting. So he goes to the grocery store, he buys groceries, and then he composts them.
Someone I was talking to recently who's become big on composting, and I can't remember who it was, but their level of enthusiasm for it, I'm like, I'm really happy for you.
I find that people who get into composting really get into composting.
Yeah, the whole needing to turn it, knowing what to add to it, knowing what not to add to it.
It was like a primary school when we had a worm farm at the primary school.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, they made it sound like a really big deal, except that everyone used to go down towards the worm farm and they go, get away from the worm farm. So no one went near it. On one hand, it was like, we want to go see the worm farm. And get away from the worms. Okay, what are we going to do to the worms?
I just find worm farms to be, they sound really cool, but they're just ultimately disappointments because you don't actually get to see the worms. There's no...
And, when you do see the worms, literally what they're producing is, a really small amount of soil. Maybe one pot plant.
It's like worm juice, isn't it?
It's worm juice and sort of, it looks like soil, but it's basically worm leavings. But it looks like a really sort of pure soil. Poop. But it's, yeah. Anyway.
Imagine how many worms had to go through to create soil for us in the world. That's a lot of...
the idea of somebody who decided to start with the worm farm, the first person who put worms in a box and went, I'm going to watch them shit.
Yeah.
I'm going to see what comes out. And we're going to see how we can use it. Anyway, now we've talked about the big deal. There was also the semi-final on this week. Look, I tweeted out that I thought this was possibly the highest quality semi-final I've ever watched.
Oh,
of
start to finish.
of any series. And look, There were things that went wrong in it, don't get me wrong.
No.
But I think the quality of what they had to approach and what they had to do, the circumstances under which they had to do it, and the quality of what they ended up producing,
Yeah.
it's for me, and we've seen Canadian every series, we've seen all the Australians, we've seen most of the British series, we've seen a couple of the Kiwi series, I've seen bits of Kenyan, and I've seen bits of even Italian. By far and away, my favourite of the semi-finals that I think I've seen is this one.
Fantastic. I thoroughly enjoyed myself, you know. You had me at mochi.
Yeah. So
I feel like a little bit like they Jerry Maguire'd me at the beginning.
you had me at mochi. Now, we got a really good pre-credits joke too tonight. Now, obviously, no Anne. Now,
some would have you believe that she's probably sick, and you know we are still in plague time, so you know the logic would be she's off with the plague. But
look,
no.
we know the truth. You know the truth. You listen to this podcast. You know the truth.
Look, we know Anne is essentially a Paladin monk in disguise as a comedian.
Completely.
You know, she may look gorgeous, but that makeup she puts on, they're all just spells engraved into her skin.
And it's also covering up the battle scars.
Exactly. Her hair might look really piled on. You know what that is? It's fucking, you know, like 16 plus helmet of
she's woven.
deflection.
It's woven fabric,
yeah,
which is designed to repel attacks from the Schlag.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, the Schlag
has emerged this season.
Well, I mean, look, we talked about the idea of the Schlag comes into the Pavilion usually through the Yorgi draws. Now, last week, as we know, they had to make use of the Yorgi draw.
Yeah, and it's Schlag. It's basically the hell mouth has been opened. The Schlag mouth has been opened.
So what everyone obviously, what I can put together is
the Yorgi draws are essentially the basement at
Sunnydale High School. Exactly. Why keep building it there? I don't know. But what I found really interesting, I suspect that what happened was one of the bakers at the end of the last episode just left the Yorgi drawer slightly ajar.
It's like trapdoor, you know.
It is.
Feed me.
I really hope fellow Commonwealth members, you know, Canadians, have seen all the episodes of the trapdoor, which is amazing. If not, go look it up. But I can only suggest there was a slight crack in the Yorgi drawer.
Out came that Eld Bake horror.
And as the Schlag emerged, Anne was like cleaning up as she does, because she's, you know, a wonderful person.
Plus, it's also a nice, you know, cover for her, just making sure, you know, all's well that ends well.
Yep. And obviously there was a big battle, and like, well, she defeated the big bad. At what cost? At what personal toll?
Look, you know, there is always one in a generation hero, and we know that's Anne Pennell. Yeah. And she's given everything she's got to keep the Bake Off Pavilion safe.
Into every generation, a Schlag Slayer is born, and Anne Pennell, salute. But what we got as a result was a Bruno and Kyla intro.
Exactly. So, thank you for your service, but on to the fun.
Now, I can say that I have seen this Bruno before. When I asked him to do something for the Virgies a couple of years ago, and got one of the funniest things I think we've ever seen came back. And I love Silly Bruno. Silly Bruno is one of my favourite things on the planet, because this is a man who has gravitas and respect the world over as a chef, and he's just really funny and really silly.
I get to deliver the punchline.
Yes, and like, you know, again, the way they did the read, you know, Kyla doing the whole, it's fancy dessert week, and then Bruno doing, ad lib something funny.
And you know, it's a joke as old as time, not as old as the parrot joke, but it's, I'm sure if you read some, you know, there's a cuneiform tablet somewhere waiting to be discovered where, you know, two bake-off hosts walk into a shed.
Mind the Schlag, and off you go. So, the signature. Let's talk about it, because you are ready, you are here. I have not seen you this excited for a bake in a very long time. 2 hours to make...
I'm a mochi man.
2 hours to make 10 mochi donuts. Now... Obviously, you know, British have attempted a Japanese week before, which was atrocious and really tone deaf. What I really appreciated about this episode of Canadian is they went Japanese and they went Filipino, and it was great. It was respectful. It was an open enough brief.
Plus, we didn't need the theme. Okay, it's a vague theme. It's fancy desserts, and that could have taken us in any direction. If it was me setting it, you'd all be making Viennettas, or maybe a Vienna chocolate ice cream. Because to me, the height of or a heart. A street's heart.
Oh, a street's heart is better than a Magnum.
I know. Don't make those anymore.
Well, they do make the heart, actually. The heart's still made.
they?
Yeah, heart's still made.
What?
Yeah.
Where?
They don't make Vienna chocolates anymore. Trust me, Vienna chocolate, the height and class of ice cream. Look them up online.
too classy
Look
for
up
the world.
Streets Vienna chocolate. You're welcome. Now, with the mochi, which of the mochi don't like? We talked about it last week. I said I don't know if I like Fancy Dessert Week because I thought it was too broad. I like it because of the way they then used that brief. And I thought they did a very good job because what they did was they tested every single component before you get to a grand final. They tested everything. And the way they did it was so thorough that it didn't matter which three made it to the grand final. You'd sit there and go,
That's
that's fair. That's absolutely fair. So 2 hours for the 10 mochi donuts. We did also get the answer to what Fancy Dessert Week is, because Alan did ask Lauren what is a fancy dessert, and Lauren's response was, the more you have to cry, the more fancy it is.
Look, I'm sure that there are streets workers who are just bawling their eyes out making the Viennetta, and that's what makes it fancy. So I agree, Lauren.
Yep.
Oh no, I've not done the chocolate layers correctly. Oh
I'm
no,
not getting an ice cream wave on the 5th layer.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they got Viennetta over there. Look it up. Viennetta. You're welcome.
They have it in the UK.
Yeah, but
I assume that the Queen just went around decreeing before, after the
her
coronation.
last thing.
No, I think it was.
Give them Viennetta! You got very Julia Child there for a minute. Save the liver!
It was kind of her Marie Antoinette moment.
Let them eat Viennetta!
It was during the Thatcher years.
You turn if you want to. The lady's having a Viennetta.
What, they can't afford milk? Well, give them Viennetta.
Melt it down in your coffee. Anyway,
I'm going to use my Vienna chocolate.
Anyway, on the complete opposite side, by the way, to Margaret Thatcher, Bruno's Rainbow Pocket Square was beautiful.
That's gorgeous. I loved it. Little
Subtle
nod.
touch, beautiful.
Yeah.
So, let's get into sort of what they each made. So, Kristie. So, first of all, how many people do you know who turn around and go, they're going to riff on a Mont Blanc?
Oh,
What are you going to riff on a Mont Blanc?
we know one. Her name's Kristie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I loved, she
You
clearly...
should see it when she was in her jazz phase, riffing on a Mont Blanc. Just something she whips out every time she gets a new a hobby.
New hobby happens, and what?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, it's Canada, and certain shops are very legal in Canada. Riffing on a Mont Blanc can take on a whole.
Reefing on a Mont
Reefing on a Mont Blanc.
Anyway,
So I really love what she said. I was going for the noodly type sort of things. Very, very flying spaghetti monster of her.
I was about to say the same thing.
Touched by his noodly appendage. But I liked the fact that. And Kyla even commented on it. There's different takes on a Mont Blanc. I like the fact you went for height. And she really went for height on those Mont Blancs. Her other donut was a
I'm glad she didn't try and make pens stick out of it.
I'm happy for that.
Yeah.
The other one was a pork floss and 5-spiced peanut donut with a chestnut cream.
Oh, this to me sounded like the perfect. Okay, we talked about carnival snacks last week.
Yes.
I think this is the follow-up. You're going to go and get the...
5-spiced peanut donut with
Yes.
pork floss.
Screw your cheese on a stick or your chip on a stick these days.
Pork floss.
Yeah. It's the next evolution to fairy floss.
And as with all of Kristie's bakes, there was a link back to her family made again. And because she was talking about, her mother really likes mochi. Mochi was something from that her mother really likes and stuff like that.
So she's making it.
And Bruno then turns around and goes, well, do you think you have an edge because of that? And Kristie, instinct kicked in. And she just looks around and goes, oh, no, not at all. Have you seen the talent?
Time slowed down in the bake-off shed and this voice just overcame it in an Australian accent. Careful, Icarus.
Careful, Icarus. So then we got Lauren making... Now, in the middle of all of this, by the way, and we'll talk about I'm going to talk about her ingredients when we get there, but for some reason, they kept cutting back to Zoya, who was individually introducing every single one of her ingredients. So they cut to her the first time, and she goes, this is my jackfruit. Then they cut away, did something else. They came back, and when they came back to it, she's like... this is going to be my tamarind chutney. Go away. Come back. This is my cassava. Go away. Come back.
You know why? Because someone else had tried to entrap her into going, yep, this is my week. Like, she might have been like, I come from a long line of fancy desserts. Did you know my family invented Viennetta? And they're like, do you think this is your week? And to kind of like pace it out, she's like,
I'll slowly introduce my ingredients.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, proudly introducing. No. But yeah, that was the funniest part of the editing for me, was they kept on cutting back. And Zoya would introduce another ingredient, and then we'd leave. And then we'd come back, and Zoya would be doing another ingredient.
It's like the opening to a 70s sitcom, isn't it?
Yes!
You're waiting for the last one to be with.
Yeah, and sort of a wink at the camera and a bit of a point. We cut to Lauren, who was making honeycomb. And then again, we left Lauren to go and talk to Zoya about one of her ingredients. Then we flew over to Chi, who goes, so I'm making a Vietnamese fried chicken mochi donut. And I got lost for a minute there. Now, look, it's no secret. I really like Vietnamese flavours. I love all those sorts of things. Mm-hmm. Earlier in the series, she made the Vietnamese chicken curry of her mother. Mm-hmm. This time, she made her mother's Vietnamese fried chicken. Mm-hmm. I would like all of your Vietnamese chicken recipes, please.
I thought you were going to say, I would like your Vietnamese mother. Like,
I mean, look, if I can get access for
swap here. You can have Glenda for a while. She's lovely.
She'd love going to Canada.
Oh my God, it's like mum swap.
You know,
but a better version of wife swap.
It's her birthday this week. She can go on a trip to Canada.
Oh, that'd be great.
There you go. Don't have to pay for
a lottery ticket for tomorrow night. So tonight. It's tonight.
Yeah, I've got one too. We might win. Anyway,
see you soon, Canada.
You'll just get a podcast. It's just a 5-second podcast going, fuck you. Well, that's it. So anyway,
bitches.
So anyway, she was going with the Vietnamese fried chicken mochi donut. Now, the way she presented this was really cool. So she decided to do a take on the peanut butter sandwiches with the peanut butter and banana sandwiches. So she did peanut butter cream and bananas Foster. So, they get it in and then flambe the fuck out of it. Mm-hmm. And then garlic cilantro donuts shaped like fries to go with the fried chicken.
Yes.
It was absolutely mental what she came up with.
Yeah, and I love her remembering, school lunches, what she used to bring to school were either way out there or just plain as fuck. As someone who just got plain as fuck all the time till we moved to Ultimo, then my dad decided to zhuzh it up a bit. He used to make this seasoned chicken that we'd take. It was beautiful. Nothing on the cool shit that my friend, because I went to a primary school. Yep. I think there was about 90 kids in the school and at least 25 to 30 different nationalities. So it was fucking phenomenal. Between Southeast Asian stuff, my best friend was Indian. I introduced my mum to curry. That was interesting.
I got money for a lunch order.
Did you?
Yeah. I got money for lunch orders.
Oh, look, that was before I moved to... So Ultimo Public School did not have a canteen. Because there were only 90 kids. There's no money to be made there. There's not even a break even. No. But when I went to bigger primary schools before then, it was the paper bag with the money stuck on the top and your lunch order written on it into the basket.
Into the basket, and then someone would take the basket to the canteen, and then your lunch orders would come back.
Oh, toasty days were the best on
days. I used to get what they referred to as yummy drummies. Now a yummy drummie,
as opposed to a yucky drummie.
Well, realistically, it is. So what it is, it's a chicken and corn fritter thing, but it's that reconstituted chicken. The powdered chicken, the pulped chicken that's not really nice, but with corn chunks in it.
Okay.
Because that adds flavour. And then they crumb it. But of course, you couldn't deep fry it because you couldn't deep fry it. So it was warmed in a pie oven. So the crumbs would go a soggy consistency.
Why did you choose? Did your mum choose this thinking you're getting vegetables?
Well, the problem was that I used to get the pizza singles. But then they stopped doing pizza singles. So then it was the yummy drummy, and I wouldn't do sandwiches because you know me, I don't really do sandwiches. No. But so it was.
Except if they're ice cream sandwiches,
then I'll do them. Yeah, but it was and high school was basically just me getting a pizza every day. You know, there's a reason. There's a reason why I wasn't a prime athlete.
My high school was the best. They did the best roast beef rolls. That was once a week. Then we had on Thursday, someone's mum used to bring in the best fucking fried rice. Not as good as mine, but still pretty good.
Amazing.
Then there was the hot chicken rolls. But like the leftover chicken and in mayo and on a crispy, it was the best. But yeah, otherwise it's the usual, pies, sausage rolls.
Yeah, I used
salad rolls when I was feeling healthy.
I took to doing potato pies for a period of time there. But that was sort of it. It was literally the canteen every day.
But to explain to people from North America, the difference between like Australia and North America is we didn't have cafeterias. Like there was no place to sit.
No.
These were literally hole-in-the-wall shops that you would go and line up at, order your food, get it, and then you just go sit in the playground.
They still are. We don't do cafeterias. So we don't have this thing where you go down the line and, they put stuff onto a tray, under a plate on a tray, and you go down.
And then you go and sit like civilized people at a table.
No, it was literally you go to the window, you get your food, and then you just go sit somewhere in the school. That's literally it. Yeah. It's not a sort of that cafeteria style.
Yeah, that's why everything you had to be able to hold it in one hand and eat it with the other. Like, did you get the tray lasagnas that were heated up in the pie?
That was the other thing I used to eat all the time, the tray lasagnas. Mm-hmm. Although to this day I can't do them now.
Oh no, they're fucking shithouse now.
Yeah, once your palate shapes into like the adult palate where you actually like food.
When you've actually gone to proper Italian restaurants and had delicious lasagna.
One of the things, and again, please, I know we're on a tangent here, but who gives a shit? Let us know, first of all, about your lunches. But secondly, also let us know, when was the moment that your palate changed enough that when you now go back and try to eat any of that stuff, I thought, that's a memory. And you go back and eat it and you go, no, that's crap.
There was something recently I did that I'm like, don't let me ever do that again.
Yeah, I remember we did it. And you went, I really want to go back and do it. I can't remember what it was. And you had it. And you looked at me and you went, I can't do that again. That's terrible.
Yeah. Like, I think my for my sanity, my brain has just blocked it out.
Blocked it out. Smart move.
So let's move back on to mochi.
So let's move, because that was where they had a conversation. She had a conversation with Kyla, where Kyla was like, so the shape of these, is that going to be able to, the fries, is that going to work? And she's like, cooking, they were like, cooking time's really important. Mm-hmm. And again, what it came down to was Kyla had pictured smaller fries, whereas what they had done is slightly bigger chips. Yeah, the difference between chips and
wedges.
Fries. Yes. Then they go over to Lauren, who's like, I'm making potato-based.
They're like your croquettes.
They were. Lauren's like, I'm making potato-based mochi donuts because I really like potato. Fair. Sweet potato in particular, and she did it two different ways. Now, first one was a Taiwanese style with taro mascarpone, and the second one was Japanese style with a honeycomb crumb, but a Korean roasted soybean powder, injalomi. So, injalomi, what I loved about this is that she's doing something that politically no one's been able to do. She's bringing the Japanese and the Korean together.
Congratulations.
Historically, no, doesn't end well when it happens. But well done. Sweet potato donuts. I'm here for it. And again, like that, the taro looked really cool. The taro mascarpone looked really cool. You can see the purple swirls through it. And also, she used that to cut the petals.
Oh, I love that. She's like, look, watch this, Alan. Got a little trick I do. See, I just cut it like this. It comes out like a rose. No, not that kind of rose.
Not a rose.
Not a pavilion rose.
Not a pavilion rose. Is that what we're referring to it as now, by the way? It's a pavilion rose?
Yes. Oh, I think her pavilion rose was showing. It's a song from the 1880s, the old pavilion rose. Sung in taverns or saloons, I should say, across the Wild West.
Yes, there's lots of hey around the outside of it. So then we cut to Zoya, who finally gets to put all of those ingredients she'd been introducing together. Mm-hmm. And she was doing jackfruit lime clove mochi. Mm-hmm. And the second ones were cassava with tamarind chutney. And as she said, her background is Tanzanian, so it's very African street food style. Mm-hmm. And she was using the scissors to make the jackfruit spikes in the same way that John did the pineapple.
When I was young and I thought I should have a hobby and I got into stamp collecting, we'll say that as a very brief phase in my life, my favourite stamps I ever got were these Tanzanian ones that were of dinosaurs. Like, they fucking rocked.
Lauren is hearing this right now and going, can I have?
Yeah. I'm like, I thought Tanzania would have been the acest place to live because of their stamps.
Oh, dinosaur stamps win.
Yeah.
And then we got to the frying point, and at this point they all had to go over. They had the fryer set up as a station at the back, where Zoya was really. And this is part of this episode. There was a lot of people sort of giving a lot of good support, and like Zoya, like Kristie's frying, and they're like, "You got this long," and Zoya's like, "That's plenty of time, Kristie. You've got plenty of time." So they're just sort of calming each other. It was really cool.
I need you in my life too, Zoya. I might just do what I've done with everything with Bruno and Kyla. Praising Kristie is just
take it.
Just audio record that and use that.
I'll make a soundboard at the end of this series,
Thank
but I'll
you.
give you, and you can just hit those buttons and different people saying nice things to Kristie.
Yeah.
And Alan goes over to Zoya's bench at this point when she's sort of panicking a little bit and goes, "You probably want me to go." And she's like, just a little bit. So Alan's like, "Okay, I'll go a little bit." And of all the things that I thought we might see that were a bit challenging in this bake, piping tips was not high on my agenda.
I know, like, how can a piping tip not work? It's just like it's got one fucking job.
Like, Lauren's wasn't
Have
working.
shit pushed through it.
Like, Lauren's star one wasn't working. And then Kristie's fell out of the bag completely while she was piping. She did the first one and then just sort of...
Oof.
And, of course, because it was brown, it didn't. It looked... Yeah. Also, can I just say...
It was the same kind of mess that the Schlag made after Anne
beat the shit out of it.
Served its ass to it.
Also, everyone went the extra level for presentation, obviously, in the semi-final. So, obviously, you had the height on Kristie's Mont Blancs. But then you had Zoya with the mochi sales
texture.
board.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Lauren...
And the texture on a jackfruit.
Yeah, Lauren had the boards, which said squishy and delishy.
That's me.
And the boxes that said squishy and delishy. And Chi also, they had the diner-style baskets and everything was served like it was in a diner, which was really cool. Yeah. They all looked amazing, though. So let's get to the judging.
I do like how she went for a diner style and not just a cafeteria board.
Very much diner.
Or a lunchbox.
Yes. So
that would have been cool, though. I wonder what
lunchbox.
Lunchbox Chi would have had.
Oh, that would have been interesting. Please let us know, Chi. So
we know Lauren's. It's
dinosaur. So Zoya, they said that it looked...
Zoya's was her mum's.
Completely her mother's. And Kristie's I'm going with was martini glass. If you've seen her Instagram, if like seriously, if she doesn't go into the business of making cocktails professionally, she's doing it wrong. So Zoya, they said it looked inviting. The jackfruit tasted very much like just a really nice marmalade. They were perfect. The texture balance was excellent, and the cassava in particular, they said, was the right root vegetable to use and had really good texture inside there. Lauren's, they said, was joyful and playful, well baked and delicious with the Taiwanese ones in particular. And Bruno compared the top to like creme brulee. So obviously not creme caramel. Now the Japanese style ones tasted excellent, but the dough needed that bit of cream because the dough itself was a bit dry, but they said that was good that the cream was there because the cream helped to balance that out a bit, and they also wanted more of the honeycomb because it was only a little bit of the honeycomb. Cheap. They said the piping of the filling inside the sandwich, in the circle, rather than rolling that dough out and trying to make it sit, meant that the texture of the dough was spectacularly good and it helped the integrity of the dough. And Kyle was like, I could just eat that donut all day long. Also said that was nothing like any of the sandwiches she took to school.
If my mum packed me that, 1, hilarious, 2, deliciousness, and I probably would have just like gone, that's it, I'm out for life. Like,
exactly.
That's perfect.
They also said the garlic cilantro bake was vibrant and flavourful, and the chicken was absolutely delicious, but didn't detract from the donut. In fact, it made you want more of the donut. And Kristie, they said it was a really good version of a Mont Blanc, but the rings of the dough ball ones were a bit inconsistent.
Yeah. And she, when they showed her, she was like, "Oh, there's so many to roll." Like that was probably should have just Well, I guess maybe she wanted to pipe them, but the piping heads just...
The piping heads weren't in the favour. So the dough on those first rolled ones was a bit dense, but they said the Mont Blanc was perfect. So they were two different ones. And then they cut back to Kristie to talk to her for her afterthoughts. And her afterthought I loved was, I'm wearing a bow tie, so everything is fancy. Her bow tie was sensational, by the way.
Azalea was just going... Even I'm not that fancy.
No, well, she's definitely not that fancy.
But I will appropriate it.
Exactly. She will completely appropriate it. Now, they cut to Kyla for the start of the technical, and her quote was, "The flavour with the most requires a nice toast." And you could hear Nigel going, I did that really early week 2.
Yes.
Like, there was burnt toast in there, Week 2, I've done it already. Kyla loves me. No, what she was referring to, of course, was toasting cashews. Because...
I think you say toasting your nuts.
Yes, well, because it was the Sans Rival. So 2.5 hours. It's a Filipino version of a dakwa. Or as, of course, we call it on the podcast, dakwas.
Dakwas,
It's a dakwas. It's a dakwas.
Return of the duck.
Here it is. So it's a cashew meringue rather than doing your traditional sort of almond meringue. It was a cashew meringue, French buttercream in layers. Then they had cashew sugar spikes on top and brittle. Then we got Alan doing his Anne impression, which I loved. On your marks, like he needs to bring that out more.
Yeah. Well, it looks like, sorry to skip ahead, it looks like from what we've seen of what's coming up on the grand final, he may have to do some impersonations of Anne.
Look, I want a puppet.
An Anne puppet.
It needs to be an Anne puppet.
But, like, maybe one of the Avenue Q kind of people.
Look, we've seen Butts have to handle Australian before by herself.
Yeah, true.
She did when Claire went down. We saw Butts have to do that, so, Now, my first thought when we saw the cake was the cashews and sugar a very jousting night.
Yes, let's take you back to
British Bake Off.
When it was good. That said, there is a scene I've seen from the recent season that I've got to see, which is Noel Fielding really running away from a baker going, am I helping now? Like,
I mean, look, to be honest with you, probably not. But this was Andrew. It was Andrew Smith with a Y.
That's right.
And he made his cake. He made his cake with the jousting knights.
That's right. It was a Tudor.
Yeah, Tudor cake.
Yeah.
Tudor bake. We haven't seen too many series of British Bake Off at all. It was a Tudor bake, and he had jousting knights.
Now, unfortunately, the placement of the
candied
jousting stick
yes.
was more groinal area than handle area.
Yeah, the two knights were certainly jousting, but not with lances.
No, and look, it's the kind of jousting I'm sure two men. I mean, if I was in a gay male relationship and I was a gay male, this is the kind of action that I would do. Like, I've got a penis. I'm going to do cool shit with it.
Less jousting, more docking. Don't look it up. Okay.
No, if your jousting goes wrong, you might dock. Or, unless your jousting stick does not have a guard.
Less jousting, more docking. Do not look it up. Please don't look it up. Especially you, Mum. Don't look it up.
So she'll just find docking stations. It's fine.
It's fine. So the complexity of making a nut-based meringue. I know. I need to give you a minute. Have you a moment?
Keep going on with the nut.
No.
The cashew-based meringue. Yep.
Yes, the nut-based meringue. It's important to make sure that the nuts are blended perfectly within your meringue because you don't want chunky nuts. No one needs a chunky nut in the meringue. You can't see Kristie's face right now. I can. This is fantastic.
Fuck you, Buchanan.
So you need to make sure that they've cooled and dried before they're lathered in buttercream.
Look, you don't want to cream your nuts.
You don't want to cream your nuts until they're cool and dry.
Because we all know, scientists say you've got to have like your nuts at a certain temperature for it to be successful. And if you're going to cream your nuts, get the temp right.
Especially on a hot day. So, look, genuinely, what I really liked about this challenge was that it's, first of all, the nut-based meringue is a harder one to make than a normal meringue, obviously, because the texture's a bit different. But secondly...
And combining it, you don't want to knock the air out.
Yeah, secondly, you're also using cashews, not, more traditional sort of style nuts in there too, which has got their own complexities in terms of sorts of what their oils are, and those, they've got to think about that. And that's because that's what, as Kyla said, they went back and they had to experiment and work out how you would use cashews, which were more plentiful. So they have to change up quantities and work out how to do it, and also work out that you need to toast them to get the flavour, because cashews, as Lauren said during the challenge, remind everyone, cashews themselves are not overly flavourful.
Which is why I believe they're used as the basis for a lot of the vegan cheese.
Yeah, because again, there's no overwhelming flavour in a cashew. So
they're like the what are those chocos? Chocos of the nut world.
The chocos of the nut world. The choco, the thing that just goes into everything. Where it's a nothing flavour. So at this point, they flagged for everybody that basically they were going to be generous when it came to things like the consistency at the end, because it was a ridiculously hot day. Which I love when they get them to do things like buttercream on a ridiculously hot day, especially when you're getting them to make a bake which relies on a setting buttercream as the glue. Mm-hmm. So, not a challenge at all. But I do like this as a challenge because, again, you've got that complexity of the meringue needs to be good, then you've got to make the buttercream, and then it's about the putting it all together. And it's also knowing how far to take the cashews. You know, because you don't want them really pale, but you also don't want them burnt.
Yeah.
So that's that challenge of where do you go?
The brown stage.
Exactly.
The black gone too far. White, no.
So they did all the
put them in the sun long
They did
enough.
the initial toasting, and they asked the question about how toasted is toasted and how toasted is burnt. Again, Nigel's like, week 2. I told you, I've done this.
I've done the demonstration.
Then we go to Zoya, who has one of it's either a Freudian slip or, far more importantly, the Schlag is trying to emerge. When Zoya says, I'm trying to pipe evil.
Has she been taken over by the Schlag? Was there a remnant of Schlag? And that's kind of like the end of that, like a movie where, you think the person's dead or the entity's gone. And
it's the end of It's the end of Ghostbusters where Zul tries to get inside Ray's head.
Oh yeah, it's just that little possibility of what could happen next, and then lo and behold, there's a third.
Oh, Ghostbusters 2, sorry, when it's Vigo who tries to get into Ray's face. When Ray's staring, Ray, out of the way, we'd like to hose the man down, please, with slime. So then they had to pipe the meringue, and then they got the detailed baking instruction. Bake until golden and firm.
Well, there are descriptions there.
But when meringue, obviously, even when it's ready inside the oven, it's still not firm as such. It's got to cool and solidify.
Yeah, which takes a lot of guesswork and knowledge to get that right.
So they need to leave the oven ajar, obviously, while they're cooling it. So they have to put the spoon inside the door and to do, or
because you don't want your meringue to crack.
Or if it was Australian Bake Off, just jump up and down a lot, and the door will just flap open. As a friend of the show, Robert Harwood, has told us before, obviously walking across that, the Australian shed is a lot more springy, and every step at one point, when the old ovens, not the current ovens, but the old ovens, that the doors would bang open and close, and the temperature would change rapidly. So rather than putting a spoon in the door, just jump, just House of Pain it,
crisscross.
Except have your pants on the right way. I can't believe the backwards pants didn't take off.
And
pocket on the front. Who would have thought? So we then got to make the sugar syrup. Now, again, Zoya was using 2 thermometers, and Zoya said that she did this because she was a bit, worried, a bit neurotic about, overdoing it. Or I put it to you, Zoya, that your mother has a digital thermometer at home.
Oh yeah,
and you are planning to, how can I put this delicately, take more of your inheritance early by getting the digital thermometer, saying, I need 2 thermometers. You saw me on the show.
Yeah, like they're making me use the one in the pavilion, but how can I be sure when I know the one at home is calibrated perfectly?
Yes. So I maintain she did this to show her mother to get the digital thermometer. Once again, trying to get the inheritance early. Not the last time we're going to see it, by the way. We'll come back. We will circle back to this one. So then we candied the cashews. Now, candying the cashews itself was quite mundane. But what we did get was Lauren and Alan and a cashew impression.
Yes.
Now, there are many things that I expected to see in a semi-final of the Great Canadian Baking Show.
But Lauren's take on how a cashew would sound.
Hi, I'm a cashew. Help me. I'm impaled. Fair?
Oh, if you see... Sorry, everyone.
It's a bit...
If you've seen a cashew on a tree, it looks like a gnarly old face, the cashew seems there's a lot of waste per nut. Like walnuts, you got a bigger outer shell to get the inside, but it's not as big a waste as whatever the fuck's on top of the cashew. Like there's this tiny little cashew over the big nut. And that is the voice that I hear now whenever I picture a raw cashew, like on the tree.
That's fair.
Fruiting cashew, as you will. I think Lauren, sorry, I just renamed people. We've got Laurens and Lauras at work. So
I
many.
thought that'd be terrible for you.
Oh, fuck me. I'm perpetually apologising.
You just apologise first.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Lauren. Damn it, so close. Well, you get it right, and like, I'm still sorry. So we then made the praline, and that was when Zoya turned around to Kristie and was like, "You have nuts in your hair," and she's like, "I have everything everywhere." We did get probably the closest I've ever seen to talking in a Canadian technical.
Yeah, there was a lot of comparison on how the Dacquois, the Cashwas, what are they called?
Cashwas. That sounds like something you'd hear on a rap album. Cash Money Cashwas. You know, what is Snoop Dogg rapping about today? Getting all that Cashwas. You know. He's
lounging on the Decquois,
counting
all these Cashwas.
Lounging on the Decquois, counting out the Cashwas. Blunt was. God. So Zoya asked, how floofy are they supposed to be? And then there was this comparison that Lauren and Zoya were sort of doing in terms of that. Look, earlier on, Lauren said to Alan, "How long would you bake it for?" That's not cheating because it's Alan and he doesn't know how to cook. So he's openly said that one. But that was about as close as we've seen to helping in a technical. And I know that Canadian, unlike our Australian brethren, Canadian is very firm on that one.
Yes.
Do not communicate at all. Again, that led to one of the greatest images for me in the history of the Great Canadian Baking Show, which was Andre finishing baking and Devon, so he didn't talk to him, leaning against a fridge, munching on a cookie.
I'm not talking, I am eating.
Yes.
Cookie.
So Lauren, though, was really clever here because Lauren then put hers inside the freezer.
Yes, to cream it.
She's doing the piping going, "I'm going to pipe in the freezer." And everyone else's, like the buttercream was, I put a bit melty.
But then there was a very hot Scotsman who's going, "No, I was going to peep in the freezer. Out with your lass.
Out with your lass." So the judging. So Lauren's, they said the buttercream was a nice colour, good caramel colour. The meringue was a bit tough to cut, however. Some layers were a bit darker, which means it was slight over baking, but the buttercream was very well balanced. It wasn't too sickly sweet. Zoya, they said the caramel brittle and spikes were very dark, which meant that the sugar had been taken too far. The layers of meringue were also breaking up inside, which meant the meringue was a bit too tender. The buttercream was really good, and the cashew flavour was good. With Kristie's, they said the cake had elegance, but the cashews outside needed better chopping. That was my first thought, because when they cut and showed Kristie's on the outside, it looked like she just rammed whole cashews into the side of it.
She really needed a slap chopper at that point. Look, you know, if it was me, Kristie, on that show, the stuff I would be asking for my mum, 1, slap chop, 2, her cookbooks.
The question is, do Cuisine Art make those? By the way, we're going with another pronunciation because apparently last week was wrong too. So Cuisine Art, do they?
Cuisine Art?
Yeah, Cuisine Art. Do they do a slap chop? I don't think they do.
No, we'll get onto that Cuisine Art.
Cuisine Art, get onto that. Please, if you've got any other pronunciations, please let us know. We've got one more week. They said that it cut really well, though. The meringue cut beautifully. Great layers. The meringue had great flavour, and the buttercream was incredibly smooth. It was very Rob Thomas and Carlos Santana. Yeah, it was more. I had to classify it. It was Rob Thomas and Carlos Santana, not Rob Thomas himself, who's not crazy, just a little unwell.
I like to think as well that the Rob Thomas you're referring to is
the creator of Zombie.
Yeah, iZombie.
That is, by the way, one of the greatest moments in the history of television. Yeah. So Chi, they said the nuts weren't toasted enough, but the spikes were excellent. Was very hard to cut. The cream was inside trying to split. The bottom was overbaked, but as you got up the layers, it was better. So, started from the bottom. Now we're here.
Do you think cheese cream was had allied itself with the Schlag? And on the defeat of the Schlag, it was trying to split. Get it?
Quite
get
possibly.
Out of here.
And that's maybe she knew this, and that's why the bottom layer was tougher. Because it was protecting the cream.
Yeah, it's no, you've got a good heart. You don't need to go down with the Dark Lord of Schlag.
And the higher up it got, the better it got. So it was Chi last, then Zoya, then Lauren, and then Kristie. And which meant when they got to the table talk segment, they basically just went, we don't fucking know because everyone's even.
Yep.
The people who did really well on the technical fucked up the signature. Although I did love it where
it's not fucked up. It's like they were just small mistakes.
Yeah,
like...
no one fucked it up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it was like, my favourite part of that was, they said the people who did well in the signature didn't do well in the technical. And then they cut to Kyla, who was obviously fed the line and went, and vice versa. Well, yes, that's what we meant. So, in terms of the table talk, they basically said straight up, it's the showstopper. Mm-hmm. And whatever happens in the showstopper is going to determine who goes through to the grand final.
Yeah, and look, it can happen like this, and you got to have your game day ready to go.
So, the showstopper is a jelly art cake, 4.5 hours, and you needed to feature traditional layers with sponge, mousse, or ganache, but with a jelly point on top.
I want to take a moment.
Please do.
And just talk to the producers of Canadian. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for taking note. Mochi? No, we've mentioned that on the podcast before.
Yep.
What was the other thing we said we wanted to see and we got? Something a couple of weeks ago. Tonight, there was an opportunity for someone to create the Women's Weekly Swimming Pool Cake featuring jelly. And, we kind of got the outside of it, but in palm...
Yeah, we got the outside of it sugarcane.
Sugarcane form.
But we got the inside of it.
Oh my God, with Lawrence! But better, because instead of crappy
people in a swimming pool,
we got dinosaurs! Although it was the perfect opportunity to put in a plesiosaurus and we didn't get it, but that's okay. It's only one of my 2 favourite dinosaurs. The other's the Triceratops.
Completely. So.
But yours, I am a Stegosaurus.
Yeah. Simply for the memes. So Kyla sort of laid this out really well. So when they cut to Kyla and where she does the description of the bake, Kyla says, I really like this one for the semi-final because you have to have a technically perfect base. And then you have to produce a ridiculously good artistic top. Mm-hmm. So it's the structural level of your baking, it's the flavour of your baking, and then it's the creativity and design of your baking, all in one bake.
And there is so much thought that has to go into this on the structural integrity you're talking about, how it's going to support the jelly, which is heavy, particularly when you're popping fondant friggin'
which we'll come to in a little bit.
Into it. And layers, they specified layers, so incorporating that, you've got to have things that stick those layers together, and critical choices need to be made.
Exactly, and especially given that we know that obviously the day before had been ridiculously warm. I'd like to sort of know what the temperatures were on that day. Probably it looked a bit cooler, but if it's still a bit warm, you've got some thinking that's got to go on there. So, and I love, I think Kristie summed it up beautifully when they cut to her and she goes, oh, don't worry, I'm just doing a weird cake. Yeah. Meanwhile, Zoya was injecting coloured jelly into the existing jelly. And this is where Alan goes, but did you get the syringes from work? And she's like, of course not. Wink.
It's beautifully done, Zoya.
Zoya has in the last couple of weeks clearly felt more and more confident as she's gone.
Yeah.
A couple of weeks ago when I was sort of looking at it, I was like, oh, look, she's really good, but this is a really tough group of bakers. I don't know how she's going to go. In the last couple of weeks, Zoya has come on amazingly strongly.
Yep.
And her concept there was really cool. Now, we've seen injection of jelly into jelly before in British when we saw that.
Yan.
Yeah, when Yan did that with the
ode to her dad.
Yeah, Yan did that with the ode to her, the heart cake thing, which was absolutely amazing. This was really, she described it and I wasn't quite sure how it was going to look, but what ended up coming out looked amazing. So it was sugarcane ginger jelly, lemon sponge, and then a ginger lemongrass pastry cream, and the idea was sort of the shoots going up through the cake.
And as you were looking down through the jelly, it was like you were looking into
jungle.
A sugarcane jungle.
It was amazing. And the way that those points ended up coming out, because when she did it, she's like, I don't quite know how this is going to look.
The only way you could have, if you wanted to Australian up that sugarcane cake, set it on fire and just have midnight oil playing out the front
have
of it.
midnight oil. Have the Lisa and just dancing while it burns. How do we sleep while the jelly's burning? They asked Chi what the secret was to a good jelly pour, and their answer was clear the bubbles and talk nicely to it. Accurate. By the way, have we ever seen a series of bakers wish their cakes well so often when they put them in the oven.
Look, I think they've learnt that, everything has an energy. Just throw it out there.
The bacon gods are real.
Bacon gods are real. Your food's sentient till you masticate it and digest it.
I'm hopeful it's not sentient when you masticate it. Don't need that.
No one wants to be watched or observed while you're masticating.
Especially not from the inside. So Lauren obviously was making a dinosaur-themed bake. Yeah. Now, obviously, we did notice at the start of it that she had the dinosaur everything on. So she said this is an ode to all of that. And she talked about the idea that, I'm a young woman in finance. I like to dress with fun things and all that. So it's very hard to be taken seriously by a lot of these people.
Patriarchy.
So I want to just sort of represent the idea of I can be fun.
Capitalism crushing your soul.
Yeah. I can be fun and I can be all those sorts of things, and at the same time
no
be very
humans,
good at what I do.
Just cogs in the machine.
Exactly, as Kristie talked about the other day.
Yes. Remember, rise up, little dinosaurs, and crush the machine.
So guava cake and passion fruit cheesecake and coconut jelly. So only a little bit going on there. The guava cake itself, first of all, then a bakeless passion fruit cheesecake, then the jelly layer.
There is a lot that could go wrong.
Especially when she's setting the whole thing in a wrap.
Yep.
It's ballsy.
And then wrapping when she's setting the wrap.
Yeah, it was unbelievably, that would have been really scary. The moment of removing that plastic would have been so terrifying. Because we've seen it all go wrong. Mm-hmm. Hello, Pierre. Sorry to bring that up again. But, we saw Pierre with his mousse cake in the first episode of the first series where he pulls the wrap off and it looks beautiful. Cake. Yeah, it looks beautiful. And as he opens it up, it just runs everywhere. We've seen that happen. So
but it seems to be mousse that does not set. Cheesecake set.
Well, she had 3 layers that could have fucked up.
Yep.
And that's really, really, really good. Let me come back to Zoya, who goes, well, I'm baking this cake and I've look, my mother bakes this cake before, so I've got the teacup that my mother uses to bake this cake. Now, Zoya, question.
Is that the same teacup?
Because you made it sound like it's a different teacup for a different bake, which means you are now trying to steal the entirety of the tea set before the grand final finishes.
Yeah.
If next week, every bake you have a different tea set, teacup, and a saucer, we know.
Yeah.
Because
silver teaspoons just suddenly appear. She's like, I need these. Because when I'm measuring out the sugar, I have to use a spoon per measurement.
Wait till the last episode where she just gets her mother freighted.
Pops her out.
She's stealing her mother from the rest of the family. Are you aware? I know there's siblings who listen. Are you aware that your mother is currently being stolen by Zoya? One item at a time, but now possibly her. Was she did she suddenly find herself in a crate for no apparent reason?
Or maybe it wasn't a crate. A huge semi-trailer comes along and just up stumps the house, and it's a whole. And her mum's in there, and it's kind of like Dorothy Gale.
They didn't steal the mother, they stole the whole house.
Yeah.
That's Zoya's endgame.
Yep.
She's just going to take the house. Mm-hmm. It moves. What are you using for your bakes this week? Well, everything I measure with is in the house, so I just moved it. I like that idea. Crossover with American truckers. Because I don't think they're Canadian truckers, so it'd have to be... Or ice road truckers, I think, are up in Alaska, so they could just cross the border.
Yeah.
Then we come back to Kristie, who is making her fishbowl apartment. So Thai basil cake, blackberry goat cheese mousse, and almond jelly. Now, as she said, this was based on her first apartment with her wife, which, as she said, was down on the ground floor.
No, second
floor, and everyone could see everything inside the apartment.
Because floor-to-ceiling windows, do they not put blinds up? Is there no
privacy shelters, apparently.
Exhibitionism was a key factor in applying for that apartment.
It must be able to be viewed 24/7. Yeah. We have a live stream. We're giving you this apartment for $50 a month. But there's a catch.
But it's really handy. Like once a week, they're scooped out. Someone comes along, cleans their fishbowl, cleans the gravel. Pops them back in.
Dinner is served through grated holes in the ceiling, and it just comes down in flake form.
What's tonight? Turkey by the taste.
Turkey flakes.
Turkey flakes. What's this worm? A bloodworm? That's a special treat.
Watch out when somebody comes over and you find them doing like a handstand. That means they're floating upside down and they're in a little bit of trouble. Are they dead or is it their swim bladder? They're in a farm now. They're on a farm.
Going to the ocean.
Then we cut to Chi, who's making bonbons. Now, grapefruit curd, grapefruit poppy seed cake, and a citrus jelly. And she said they said again that their mother loved bonbons and they always like to sit down and eat the bonbons, so that was what they made.
I'd like to think that she liked bonbons while listening to John Bon.
Now look, it could be one of two people. It could be John Bon Jovi, or it could be John Bonham.
Oh God!
I like the idea of John Bonham instead because then she just loves drumming. Just loves heavy rock drumming.
Yeah. That's it. Mad for the kick.
Yeah. So they cut back to Zoya, who is delighted and delirious and happy and cheering, and they cut back to Zoya, who goes, "My cakes smell like lemon, and they're supposed to." And that feels, on one hand, you're in the semi-final. You'd hope so, but on the other hand, you're in the semi-final. Fuck yeah. I mean, also I did notice that while Chi was mixing their cake, it looked a lot like dragon fruit because you had like the poppy seed in the batter and then there was like the
Wasn't
pink...
it Earl Grey?
Yeah, and then the Earl Grey. So there was
so
you had poppy seed and you had the Earl Grey and there was a bit of pink in there too in the mix as it went through. It looked like dragon fruit. Then we cut to Lauren, who simply says, "It's dino time."
And on we went. You know, it was like in Transformers when the dinosaur Transformers come out.
Yep.
Yeah, right on.
As long as it's like that and not like Dinosaurs, the 90s puppet.
Again.
The 90s puppet
Not the mama,
TV
not
show,
the
which was a
mama.
version of The Simpsons, but with large dinosaur puppets. That terrifying memory. Drop the baby. Terrifying show. We'll have to ask her about that at some point. But she then made all of the small dinosaurs to go inside before the jelly was to be poured. So again, look, dinosaurs are used to calamitous events. Lauren was just giving them one more.
I'm glad she decided to do it on a tranquil day, not like when a meteor is like pushing towards Earth and like the jelly's on a slant because there's like a tsunami coming in.
I'd like to think that had it gone wrong...
Oh, she could have said that.
I'd like to think that had it gone wrong, Lauren's ultimate plan at the end was the last 5 seconds was just to get a bunch of the sort of the stuff she was using to model the dinosaurs, roll it into a ball and just peg it into the middle of the cake and have the cake explode everywhere and go, "Dinosaur impact!" I would have done that.
Recreation for the ancient aliens.
So now everyone's pouring went okay, and then everyone went back to see if they'd set. Now, this was a bit scary.
Zoya.
So, first of all, Zoya started the injecting, and then she goes to pick it up, and as she goes to pick it up, it wasn't setting properly, and it started to collapse.
Oh, good God, I was like, no, it's terrible. I was waiting for it to fully go, but she managed it somehow to get it on there. A little bit cracked, but...
Now, what I really appreciated, though, was now they actually showed them all calling out unmolding. Now, we've talked to people before, and obviously when you take a bake out of the oven or something like that, you're supposed to call out to the camera people so they can come and see it. But using that take of them going unmolding actually added to the drama.
Yep.
So I'm happy they did it. I'm happy they left it in there because it's usually that would be the sort of cue for the camera people. But I really like they left that in there because it made it feel more intense.
Yep.
Then I thought Kristie missed a trick. So Kristie's cake starts to collapse.
Oh dear. Yep.
And it's we find out later on when Kyla sort of looked at it later on, she goes, the mousse inside was moving and didn't set properly. But here's where she missed the trick. She's talking about her first apartment.
So it was in California on the fault line?
No, just a cheap apartment. What happens in a cheap apartment?
Ah.
Crap falls down.
This is one built in Sydney Olympic Park.
Yeah, this is one of the... Yeah, again, literally, for those... Again, in Canada, you wouldn't know. They built a bunch of massive apartment towers around the old Olympic site in Sydney. And one of them developed massive cracks all the way through the foundation.
And behold, they used crap concrete.
They're like, you might want to leave quickly. All of these apartments will come down at any moment. You might want to leave. But all she needed to say was, I've recreated my original old apartment, right down to the sliding foundation.
Yep.
That's what I'm doing.
And then like, call Holmes.
Yeah, Mike
Holmes pops in.
Mike Holmes suddenly checks it
Oh no,
out.
he wasn't available, so Mike Holmes Jr. shows up.
Mike Holmes Jr. turns up.
Sherry and a couple of the kids are wandering around outside.
They're like, Holmes and Holmes, what are we going to do here? Mike Holmes comes down and just throws the whole cake out and does it again. We're going to build this cake? Right. But what I loved here, Chi ran over to help move it. So, Kristie then just sort of dumped the bottom layer. They put it back down again. And I love the way that Chi was so kind to her. She's like, can I go back and just, check mine for 2? And Kristie's like, of course you can.
Like, you're doing me a massive favour.
And it kept splitting.
Oh.
So it didn't stop.
Nope.
And they finished that challenge, at which point they came over and Zoya came over and sort of Kristie was like, no. And Zoya's like, mine's got a massive split in it. She goes, it's okay. It really is. And it was really, you could see they were all exhausted, but they were all really proud of what they put up, and they were trying to sort of reinforce to Kristie that what she put up was really good.
Absolutely.
And it was. So let's get to the judging. So Zoya. Now Bruno loved the flow of the cake. Kyla talked about it moving in the wind. It felt like it was moving in the wind as a big gust of wind blew. And
she's like Glinda, though.
She is the good witch. They did say then that obviously they did spot the crack in the jelly, but the rest of it is set quite well.
So I'm wondering, because it's jelly, could you just get a hot knife and kind of sear it? You could have cauterized it. Come on, you're stealing syringes from work. We just get a cauterizing thing. What's that thing that Dr. Pimple Popper uses?
I don't know. I don't watch Dr. Pimple Popper.
Oh, yeah.
You do. You do. They said the work that she did was really clean. The jelly was firm. The cake layers were perfect. It was very refreshing, and the kick of ginger was really nice through it. Mm-hmm. Kristie. Now, as they said, obviously, you had a bit of an error. And Bruno's like, yeah, but you were on the second floor. So the key was how well she recovered from where she was.
Yeah.
They said the furniture looked more furnished than Bruno's house.
So it's like, you live a very, Zen lifestyle. He's like, yes. That's it.
Yes.
Zen.
They said there were some bubbles in the jelly itself, but they were fine overall. The layers were even. The cake was absolutely amazing. And the light savoury nature of the basil made it unique. And that's what Kyla said where she went, look, the mousse is soft and the mousse is what did the cake in. Yeah. And look, again, I bring up Pierre's thing all the time, but Pierre's mousse cake is what fell apart. Yeah. Mousse
does not work in the
bad
pavilion.
Record inside the pavilion.
Yeah. Not to be relied upon.
But as they said, her bake was definitely something to be proud of. And 100% was stunningly good. Even with all the issues, it was still stunningly good. They said that cheese screamed bonbons. But then when they did the top shot, that jelly...
It's gorgeous. And the fucking colours, all of it was just beauty.
The colours were vibrant. The jelly was absolutely flawless. It was spotlessly clean.
I feel that if she had not come last in the technical, she was a contender for Star Baker. But it would have taken a lot.
A lot. So they said that the cake was excellent in texture, the tea flavour was clean, and the balance of cheese flavours were perfect. It would have taken a lot, however, because Lauren...
Oh my God.
Extremely creative, packed with the details as well.
Yeah.
They did say that it was brave to make it the way she did. Bruno especially called out that idea of the cheesecake and said, it's like a Japanese cheesecake, but it's a no-bake.
Because we've seen people set stuff before and there's always a little dip or something as things bleed into each other and
the layers
even for her set. Yeah.
The layers were, they did the cross-section and the layers were perfect. The colours were vibrant. And Bruno's words were, I don't believe a professional could make this cake better than you just did.
Oh, Adriana Zumba is going, I agree, actually.
Yep. And Bruno's only comment was, it said, keep baking that way. And at that point, everyone burst into tears and ran over and gave her a massive... And you could see, as they were giving her that feedback, you could see the other three behind her all starting to tear up and cry and get really... And then when she came back, they all ran in just this massive moment. It was absolutely wonderful. And you could just see that they really... knew they were going to have to agonise over this one. It's the worst week to have something not quite go your way.
And particularly when they said in the judging table beforehand, it's going to come down to
the
showstopper.
The showstopper. So it's one bake.
Yeah.
And look, Lauren was Star Baker, and that was absolutely fair.
She was Dino-Mite.
You know, again, she had...
I said
Dino-Mite.
she was Dino-Mite. Come on, give it its due.
Dino-Mite!
Thank you.
So, yeah, that feels very much like, would you say that bake was Dino-Mite? It was Dino-Mite. You can say it better than that. Dino-Mite! Okay.
Look,
it was Dino-Mite is what it was.
Yeah.
But she was the star baker. Clearly, she won the technical as well. Yeah. It's fair. The home, I can imagine that it's possibly the toughest call that they've ever had to make.
Because if you look back at the history, Zoya's been consistent, but Kristie has had moments where she's really stood out, and Zoya's standouts came a bit later in the piece.
Yeah.
And it's not because she's terrible or was terrible when she started. It was just that she and Kristie were quite prominent in the start of it all.
My three from week one that I said I thought we'd see in the grand final were Chi, Kristie, Lauren.
Yeah.
Not because I didn't think the others could necessarily make it, but they came out at 100 mile an hour.
Yeah.
And demonstrated something really early on where you're like, oh, there's something there. Zoya's bakes were really good and they were fairly solid.
Like, think of a Rapunzel tower.
Yeah,
like,
the Rapunzel tower was stunning. And she was capable of that. But then she had other ways where it sort of faded into like the mid-pack a little bit. But that's not a bad thing in Bake Off. But you sort of looked, the last couple of weeks, Zoya seems to have found her confidence.
Yeah.
This week, she clearly looked at her family background and her traditions and her bakes that mean a lot to her.
From her mum.
And what she can steal, obviously. Because that's really important with the whole idea of getting literally all of the household china. Yeah. But she clearly has thought through this week and gone, flavours that I know, flavours that I love. Mm-hmm. I'm going to stick to those because I trust myself with those. Yeah. And she did a spectacular job on that.
Yep.
Overall, it's the right decision for the episode and therefore it's the right decision.
Yeah. And look, you're only as good as you bake. You know, on the day, you know, how many times have we heard people say, it's such a shame Pierre went home on that first
Everyone
week.
we've ever spoken to from that first series in particular has talked about, and again, we talk a lot about Pierre, but they've said to me that Pierre's baking and his ability, he was one of the best bakers in that series. His flavours were amazing, and it's a shame we didn't get to see more of him because he was unbelievable. And everyone in every series has that story about people who went home in the first couple of weeks. Something went wrong, and it's just a bit unfortunate, and someone's got to go, and that's sort of the way it ends. But I think that Kristie can be incredibly proud of what she's produced over the course of everything, including this episode. She made some amazing bakes in this episode.
She's one of the bakers that will be remembered. Like, there's a lot of bakers throughout seasons who didn't win, but went like who are like, I don't want to say like fan favorites, but they really stood out. Like, we're talking about like Jodie Robson.
Yeah.
We're talking about what's her facey? Flora.
Flora and British, yes.
You know, Fee Newen from Australian. Robert,
definitely.
Who we'll never let you forget because we just keep picking him out. There's so many. Aaron Horton.
Yes.
You know, just, you know, friends of the show.
Exactly. So I think.
Plus more. Like, there's more.
Plus a lot more. But no, exactly. But
we're not completely an oligarchy.
No, we like bakers outside of our sphere too. But no, like, it's really, it's a tough one to see anyone go home semi-final week because you are so close. But by the same token, the catalogue of work that Kristie's put out there over the course of the series is unbelievable. And so obviously sad, but something to be incredibly proud of, and she should be incredibly proud. And, you know, her family, who apparently every single bake she ever made was dedicated to according to production, should also be incredibly proud of everything. You know, her mother-in-law's boot camp for making the flatbreads apparently worked a treat. Yeah. So that brings us on to the grand final. We have 3. And what a grand final it is going to be. We have, obviously, Zoya, who we just talked about then, has made that late season charge. And then you've got Lauren, who knows absolutely no fear in the way that she bakes, and the way that she, as she said today when they were talking about the mochi, and she goes, what I love about this is it gives you the opportunity to pack more flavour. So, and her use of flavours and her choice in flavours and her design is insane. And then you have what I consider to be just the purest Baker in the series in Chi, who is just a powerhouse.
Yeah.
And it's going to be another one of those where it's just going to be the bake on the day does it, because any of the three could win and everyone will look at it and go, yep.
Deserved.
Absolutely fair. Whichever of the three of you win is completely deserved. And that's been this series. This series has been the strongest overall series I think I've seen. Definitely of Canadian.
And there's been a lot of weeks, like, in this series where you kind of like, it's only by the skin of their teeth that they've gone home.
Yep.
You know, like, if they'd have stayed and someone else went home, you would have called it a fair call. It's been no real weeks where you've gone, yeah, that was...
I mean, look, it's a horrible thing that the Moose didn't set for Kristie. But if I'm Bruno and Kyla, I'm kind of thankful it didn't. Because if that Moose had set, I don't quite know how you make the decision.
Fucking...
No, I mean, we sort of talked about it.
I reckon they would go back and look at technicals.
Well, yeah, we've sort of talked about this before, that the technical is really how you split people.
Plus looking at Star Bakers, like who's got the most
Star Baker and technicals are sort of how you split people. Yeah. And so the idea there, like, you would have had to have gone with 3, because once you open it up and do a 4, everyone expects you to do a 4, and the semi-finals diluted a little bit. So
and it becomes meaningless. You know, you've got to make a call. They're a judge for a reason.
You've got to make the tough decision, because otherwise you get to the grand final and everyone nails it again. You go, what do? 4 winners? No, you don't. You pick a winner. Yeah. So I think from Bruno and Kyla's perspective, while you don't want to see anyone fail, the Moose not setting is possibly the best thing that happened, because it made a hard decision, what was an almost impossible decision, just a really hard decision. You know, it's impossible if it doesn't happen. So I don't know which way it's going to go. I'm not going to make a prediction. What I will predict, though, is that we will be back.
Yes, we will.
Quite possibly, very likely, before the grand final.
Fingers crossed.
An outside chance of more than once, but I'm just going to say definitely more than once. Definitely once.
Yeah.
More than once?
Potentially.
Quite possibly. But we'll keep that powder dry. You can work out who you think it might be. But until next time, I'm still Chris.
And I'm still Kristie.
And we will catch you all later.
Dino-Mite!